Hello everyone, I'm Eternal Flame here, and welcome back to What If Megumi Cursed Tsumiki. Yes, this series is back. However, I do have some announcements I wanted to make for the channel, as well as basically I wanted to put all of the episodes together, remove all of the recap, all that type of stuff, and put it into one video, and that is what we have here, which this is basically what I consider like the start of the story, or you could just call it What If Megumi Cursed Tsumiki 0, I guess. But before we get into this, I do have some important things I want to announce, future plans for the channel, just things that I find important, which is mainly going to center around my upload schedule. I've recently changed a lot from my what ifs, and anyone who's noticed my pattern has been able to notice there has been a slight shift, where I've decided to focus down on 2 what ifs at a time. Now, I never officially announced it until now, but that's what I'm doing right now. But now I'm going to try and change that a little bit, where I'm going to try and do 3 JJK what ifs instead of 2 at a time. Where the 3 I'm planning to do is this series, What If Toji Was Reborn, and of course What If Yuji Got Blood Manipulation Early. Though Yuji's Blood Manipulation series is pretty close to being done, so that one will be replaced pretty soon. Alongside that, I want to do an Invincible video after every single JJK video, which I've just been doing recently. But now on to the second and more big news that I want to talk about, which is talking about 2 of my other series, and what's going to be the future in store for them. That of course being What If Mahito 1, and how I would write Ryoma and Sukuna's backstory. And I'm not going to cancel those 2 series, instead I have a different plan for them. Or instead of making you guys wait for an entire series, I'm planning to upload those 2 specifically as full movies, basically. Now when they will be uploaded exactly, I'm not too sure yet if I'm being honest, but I do hope that it's going to be somewhere between late July and at longest early September. Though who knows, it might even be uploaded before then. But yeah, that's about everything, so let's truly get into this video. I'll see you guys later. Hello everybody, I'm Eternal Flame here, and today we are in for a brand new What If series, because this is one that I never would have thought of, but it is one sponsored by you guys since it is a super chat What If. So huge thanks for No Spider suggesting this What If as well as his super chat. It was really generous, so without further ado, let's get into what this What If actually is. What if Megumi had replaced Yuta? Now I have no idea how I'm going to title this What If I'm going to be honest, where the premise of this entire What If is that Megumi is going to end up being a half Gojo clan member, and that he's going to end up cursing Tsumiki, making Tsumiki into a vengeful cursed spirit. This also results in Yuta never getting involved with the narrative, Yuta not being born as a sorcerer, but more importantly, Yuta and Tsumiki get their happy lives mainly because a car never hits them. So let's start this What If proper, as the first change that happens to this timeline is Mama Guro, as Mama Guro now has connections to the Gojo clan, or at least her bloodline goes back to the Gojo clan. She's just a really far distant cousin to the Gojo clan, however she's still just a normal person. So however Mama Guro died in canon is going to be the same way they die here. Sorry to be vague about that, but that's also because we have no idea how they died in canon. It should be noted that Toji would have no idea that Mama Guro was connected to the Gojo clan either. As we then fast forward a little bit into the future, to the day Toji dies, because that same day that Toji dies, something else happens. Tsumiki was hit by a truck and died right in front of Megumi. As tears began to come from the young boy, Megumi couldn't accept this. How could his sister die so young? What did Tsumiki do to deserve this? Tsumiki was a great person, an amazing person. She didn't deserve to die like this. How dare the world take her? How dare the world kill her just like that? Why couldn't it have been him? Why couldn't it be someone like Megumi who deserved to die much more than Tsumiki did? Those questions were rattling around in Megumi's head. He wanted his sister back. He wanted Tsumiki to come back to life. He didn't want Tsumiki to die. And in that moment, Megumi changed fate. Megumi had turned Tsumiki into a vengeful curse. As Megumi picked up a necklace that felt close to him, this was a necklace that Tsumiki was wearing. Before, Megumi heard a voice that sounded familiar but at the same time not. It sounded disturbed, distorted, and for some reason it also sounded like Tsumiki, as Megumi heard it call his name. 1 year later, after this fateful day, someone would have arrived to Megumi's doorsteps, someone that he wasn't expecting. Megumi at this point had kinda gotten used to living his normal life. Unlike Yuta Akotsu, who was severely bullied, Megumi wasn't anywhere near as bullied. In fact, it kind of was the opposite, where it was shown that he was the one taking out delinquents and bullies, not the other way around. So yeah, Megumi would be fine. However, during this time, he ended up hearing several whispers in his head, whispers from Tsumiki that was haunting his dreams, until one day someone else arrived to his doorsteps, that person being Gojo Satoru. However, this time when Gojo arrived, he noticed something a bit odd, that there was a vengeful spirit that was connected to Megumi. Now in comparison to Rika, Tsumiki would not be anywhere near as violent, mainly because Tsumiki wasn't as much of a violent person. Tsumiki would more so try to operate as a curse to try and better Megumi, and make Megumi try and look for the better in people rather than actually trying to protect him. The main reason was because Megumi didn't need protecting, unlike Yuta, who definitely needed protecting for a while. This was why most people weren't actually able to detect that Megumi had been cursed, mainly because his curse was a lot more dormant in comparison to someone like Rika. However, in spite of that, Gojo was able to see with his 6 eyes, as he explained to Megumi what was happening. That he believed on the verge of death, Tsumiki had turned themselves into a cursed spirit and was now clinging on to that necklace around Megumi's body. That necklace was now cursed with the cursed spirit known as Tsumiki. And with that, Megumi asked a question. He asked Gojo if it could be possible to free Tsumiki's soul. He didn't want Tsumiki to be bound to this life. He wanted Tsumiki to be free. He wanted Tsumiki to enjoy the afterlife and not be tethered to this world any longer. And Gojo did smile a bit as he told Megumi that there was a way, but it was going to require him to become a lot stronger than he is now. And Megumi was more than fine with it. He was going to do anything in order to get powerful, in order to make sure that Tsumiki would be free. However, another thought did enter into Megumi's head as well. Tsumiki wouldn't want Megumi just to get strong in order to free her. No, Tsumiki would also want Megumi to use that power to help others as well, as he realized something else in that moment and he asked Gojo another question. He asked Gojo if there were other people like him, other people that were cursed by those that they loved, and Megumi wanted to grant them that freedom as well. And while Gojo did explain that vengeful cursed spirits themselves were rather rare, he did also go on to explain how the entire cursed spirit system worked, and that led to Megumi having another desire. He knew Tsumiki would want him to wipe out all those cursed spirits, and Megumi was going to do that. Megumi was now going to live on for what he believed that Tsumiki would want for him. And Gojo was able to see the determination on Megumi, which made him smile a bit, as he knew one thing and one thing for certain. Megumi was going to get strong enough to rival him in the future, and be strong enough to help him accomplish his own dream. After all, with the level of determination that Megumi had, he also knew that Megumi would more than likely be more than happy to help him accomplish it. This leads to a total of 8 more years passing where Megumi is training under Gojo, and he actually ends up becoming significantly stronger in comparison to his canon counterpart. The main reason why he becomes significantly stronger is because Megumi in canon really wanted to live a normal life. That was what his goal was. However, in this timeline, he is very heavily focused on trying to free Tsumiki of the curse. During the time skip, Megumi does end up manifesting the 10 Shadows curse technique as well, and Megumi was really shaping up to be an amazing sorcerer. Especially because in this timeline, Megumi had been funneling more and more of Tsumiki's curse energy into the Dark Blade that he had used against the Finger Bearer in canon. However, Gojo wanted to wait until Megumi was actually allowed to be in the school in order for him to start taming his Shikigami. Thanks to the level of talent that Megumi has, he's actually able to join in a year earlier than he would normally. That means he's part of the same class as Maki, Inumaki, and Panda. However, while he is part of that class, in this current point in time, he is actually the second strongest Tokyo High student, with only one student being stronger than him, that being Hikari Kinji. But Megumi right now is also nothing to scoff at, as right now he would be around the same level as his Shibuya counterpart, with all of the same Shikigami tamed as well. Which, keep in mind, that is absolutely insane because this is a 14-year-old just entering into Jujutsu High Megumi. However, the reason why he didn't get much stronger is because over the 8 years, he didn't really face that many life or death battles. He was mainly just training with Gojo, however now that was going to change. As Megumi entered Jujutsu High with a large amount of determination to free his sister of the curse. However, while Megumi was that strong, in terms of technique and versatility, he actually had pushed his technique to the limit. This was mainly because of the fact that Megumi felt so much more determination in comparison to his normal self. He already figured out how to use his shadows to store objects by this point. Furthermore, he also figured out how to summon his Shikigami in impartial states, similar to what Sukuna did in his battle against Yorozu. Finally, he also figured out how to summon his Shikigami in extremely small ways and change their size in order to utilize their abilities. This Megumi now was a complete monster. However, he was suddenly sent out on a mission in order to handle a grade 1 curse. This was a mission he was sent on alone as well, as no one else could really handle that type of curse. Well, Hikari could, but he was already sent out on another mission ahead of time. However, this was not an ordinary grade 1 curse. No, this was one sent out by Geto Suguru, as Megumi had gained his attention, not just because of the fact that Megumi had a vengeful spirit that he wanted to take, believing that would give him a pretty good chance at beating Gojo, but also because of something else, being the fact that Megumi was the son of Toji Fushiguro. While he didn't have any hate towards Megumi for being the son of Toji, after all Megumi was born a sorcerer, which meant that all hate towards him would be gone, he still had to admit that he was surprised that someone like Toji could create someone like this. The area that Megumi entered into was an abandoned shopping mall, abandoned due to the presence of several cursed spirits, including one incredibly powerful grade 1 that was now present. Megumi's mission and instruction was quite simple, to execute all of the cursed spirits that were currently present here. As Megumi started by cutting up several smaller cursed spirits, but he was able to pretty quickly realize while his Shikigami was getting to work that these cursed spirits were not the real deal. There was still the grade 1 cursed spirit that was present that he had no idea where it was. However, suddenly that question was answered as a humanoid cursed spirit appeared behind Megumi and punched him in the back, sending him flying through a wall. As Megumi turned around to see all the other cursed spirits starting to move away, something he knew about cursed spirits was the stronger they were, the more and more independent they were. They don't work in packs. And as Megumi got up, he heard something else land on both of his side. 2 more grade 1 cursed spirits. It was pretty clear to him in that moment that the report was wrong, as a special grade cursed spirit also entered into the room. This cursed spirit seemed to be made of stone. While Megumi did know that it was pretty likely that all 4 of these cursed spirits were going to have cursed techniques, but he was pretty certain that this special grade had a curse technique that revolved around rock manipulation. However, Megumi had no intention to go down easy, as 2 wolf-like creatures began to rush out from the shadows to attempt to claw at the cursed spirits. Megumi had summoned both divine dogs in order to attack. At the same time, he hopped back and made the hand sign to summon Nue to fly into the air. He was going to at least try to use a Shikigami to fly up into the air and make some distance so we could do some aerial attacks. As the 2 humanoid curses were pushed back by the claw attack from the Shikigami, with the other one jumping high after Megumi. All the while, the special grade clapped their hands together, resulting in 2 large rock spikes coming out from the ground that the 2 dogs were just narrowly able to avoid. Megumi, on the other hand, had Nue turn around as he used his blade to slash against the grade 1 cursed spirit as the 2 clashed for a moment before it was launched back into the ground. However, the other 2 grade 1 curses took advantage of this as they both hopped into the air, with one of them punching Megumi in the side and the other kicking Nue to the other side, forcing Megumi to unmount Nue as he deactivated Nue, while he groaned as he crashed into the ground. There was also something else Megumi noticed as well, which was the spot that the punch landed on him was glowing red, which that made him confused at first, before it glowed a bit brighter as it exploded on his arm, causing him to be launched to the side, using cursed energy to reinforce his body as well. And while that explosion definitely hurt, it didn't hurt as much as he was expecting it to. As Megumi thought to himself, one of the curses can make whatever they touch explode. Alright, I can handle this. You got this. As his 2 divine dogs hop back over to Megumi as well, the 3 grade 1 curses now all lifted up their hands, prepared in that moment, prepared to fight Megumi, but to Megumi's advantage, he now knew one of the cursed techniques that he was fighting against. As his brain kept going for possibilities of how this curse technique could work, he felt there was more than likely some conditions involved. After all, not every spot that the curses was touching glowed red and exploded. Megumi would need to figure it out, as he thought to himself, well, it doesn't matter if I figure it out or not if I kill it before they get the chance to use it. After all, right now Megumi didn't really have enough time or clues to figure out how their abilities could work, mainly because he'd only seen it once so far. Megumi was thinking about the fact that this was all really weird. After all, curses don't work with each other like this, not strong ones. As he looked over to the special grade, an advantage of this Megumi was he was even more determined to take out cursed spirits in comparison to his normal self. He really wanted to find a way to end them all permanently, so he had been able to figure out about the fact that curses got stronger with Gojo's existence. That all curses as a whole got stronger mainly because of how powerful Gojo was, so he had to wonder, was this curse's method of getting stronger forcing other curses to work alongside it? But then a second, more terrifying thought entered into Megumi's head, as he thought to himself, is this curse trying to get other curses stronger and have strong allies of curses on their side? Of course, Megumi had no idea this was a curse users doing, but this was now a theory of his, that curses might end up uniting to protect weaker curses and give them a chance to get stronger. Maybe this idea didn't leak out yet to other curses. He had no idea how curses communicated with each other. Either way, he didn't care. No matter what, they needed to be wiped out here and now. So Megumi went for the offense, deactivating both dogs for a minute before rushing towards one of the curses, as he hopped over that curse making a hand sign mid-air, as his shadow had covered that curse. As out from that shadow, one of Megumi's Shikigami manifested directly under the grade 1 curse, that being Orochi, as Orochi rose out, lifting the curse high into the air and chomping right through them. As 2 of the other grade 1s, including the one with the explosive fist, hopped up towards Megumi. Megumi was able to recognize which one was which, so he made another hand sign, which was to summon Max Elephant while lifting up his blade to clash with one of the cursed spirits. He dropped Max Elephant right onto the other grade 1, slamming it hard into the ground and crushing it. The grade 1 was still alive, just barely though, mainly because of the height that the elephant was dropped from. However, before Max Elephant could put more of its weight into it, a large rock pillar moved to get Max Elephant off of the grade 1 curse, as the grade 1 got up preparing itself. Meanwhile in the air, Megumi and the other grade 1 entered into a barrage of blade and fist clashes. However, even with this, Megumi had the advantage, as he landed cut after cut on the curse, with the cursed spirit choosing to jump back and clap its hands together. This ended up making Megumi even more confused before suddenly he felt several cuts land on his body. Each of these cuts were the same spots that he had landed a cut on the cursed spirit. And this hurt Megumi a lot. After all, he didn't have access to reverse curse technique, and he had to deal with all these cuts now on his body. This was much more than he had asked for. But the battle wasn't done yet, as the other grade 1 curse rushed behind Megumi's back and punched him into the ground, making his back glow red before it exploded to launch him deeper in. And as Megumi was about to try and get up, about to try and continue the fight, a rock pillar slammed down into his body, slamming him deeper into the ground and making a massive crater where Megumi was. As Megumi began to think that this couldn't be where it ended, he refused to let himself die here, but at the same time, what choice did he have? Well, he did have one final option. One option to make sure these curses were taken down with him, as he slowly lifted up his hands, preparing to summon Maharaga, until two hands stopped him, as a vengeful cursed spirit manifested behind Megumi, the cursed spirit of Tsumiki. As he heard a voice telling him not to throw away his life like this. After all, Megumi still had so much to live for. And it was a familiar voice. After all, this voice was the one of Tsumiki, and it was also telling him to let her handle it from here. As Megumi felt his wounds begin to heal while he passed out from exhaustion. Megumi then woke up back in Jujutsu High at the infirmary, as he had heard what had happened. Tsumiki had been able to wipe out all of the curses with relative ease. However, unlike someone like Rika, there wasn't really much of the building that was destroyed, mainly because Tsumiki still retained her relatively reserved nature and didn't really destroy that much of the stuff. She had just gotten straight to the point and wiped out all of the cursed spirits. However, this ended up with a new determination spawning in Megumi. He didn't want to have to rely on Tsumiki, mainly because of the fact that he didn't really like using Tsumiki for that. He wanted to free Tsumiki, he didn't want to force Tsumiki to have to fight. However, something else does happen a couple weeks later after Megumi had fully finished recovering. Someone had approached Megumi in order to attempt to talk to him, that person being Geto Suguru. Megumi was very much aware of who Geto was and he was preparing to fight him, but Geto told him that he just wanted to talk to him. Geto had also picked a day where Gojo was supposed to be busy on missions, mainly because he didn't want someone else to interfere. Which that busyness may or may not have been caused through Geto directly just summoning some cursed spirits that Gojo needed to take out. As this led into Geto trying to recruit Megumi, as he told Megumi about the fact that he wanted to make a world without curses just like Megumi did, and his plan of doing it was the most optimal and best way to do it, which was to wipe out every single sorcerer on the planet. Due to sorcerers not leaking out curse energy like humans do, sorcerers don't make cursed spirits, however humans do. Every single human on Earth is going to continue to make cursed spirits so long as they stay alive, so the best way to handle this would be by eliminating them all now. And he also knew he needed Tsumiki's power, but he didn't exactly want to kill Megumi in this as well, mainly because Megumi not just had access to Tsumiki, but also had access to the 10 Shadows as well, so he really wanted to try recruiting him. However, Megumi was able to immediately tell him no. After all, Megumi found this plan stupid on so many levels. Not just on an emotional front, mainly because he didn't want people to die since Tsumiki was originally a normal person, so he didn't want people like Tsumiki to die, but also because just Geto's plan was dumb on a logical front, mainly because while yes, eliminating humans would end up causing cursed spirits to stop spawning, as a result of that you would have to deal with the side effects of all the massive spikes of negative emotions that we're going to cause by wiping out every single human. After all, curse energy significantly increases at the point of death. So sure, yes, while they'd wipe out every single human on the map, now they have to deal with a world of stronger curses. Furthermore, he also explains that even if they do succeed in winning this war, even if they do succeed in wiping out all of the cursed spirits that are going to come as a result of humanity dying, what is going to happen with the world? The world itself is not made to be sustained off of what, a couple 10,000 people at best, because let's just assume that there are at best 10,000 sorcerers or something like that. How much further is humanity going to be set back because of Geto's dumb plan? And Geto was left very astonished by this, not just because of the fact that there were a lot of things wrong with his plan, but also because of the fact that he was having all of this told to him by a 14-year-old. At the same time, Jujutsu High finally noticed Geto's presence as well, alerting Gojo to return, and Gojo returned nearly a second later. This leads into Geto leaving after declaring that he is going to start a war against Jujutsu High, and he's going to start the Night Parade of 100 Demons. As we now return back to Geto, who is currently returned back to his home base in order to think things over and prepare for his eventual attack, but more importantly, he has also returned in order to fully contemplate if he wants to go over and through his plan again or not. After all, Megumi had brought up several valid points. Even if Geto did succeed in wiping out every cursed spirit that would arise as a result of the fear that would come from wiping out humanity, even if they did succeed in that, they would have to start over from scratch, and the world would effectively be reset back to the Iron Age. After all, while Geto and the other sorcerers were smart, it would take way too long to learn how to rebuild everything. They didn't know how to rebuild all of that, and they would have to find their own way to do so, or they would have to hope that they can rebuild everything from scratch. After all, there was only so much their curse techniques and curse energy could do. It made it even worse that there was no way they were going to get Gojo on their side either, who could help with this, or other sorcerers who might have curse techniques that fit with this. Sure, it would help to permanently remove curses from the world, but was the risk really worth it? As he had a flashback back to when Yuki and him talked so long ago after the defeat of Toji, remembering back to this entire conversation that spawned this idea in his head to wipe out all of humanity. As he had to question if this was the reason why Yuki didn't go down that path. Sure, it would be an immediate fix, but there would be way too many bad consequences and they would have to reset the world from scratch. Yuki was trying to find a way to do it without needing to reset the world, and it all became clear to him. He had let his rage, his hatred towards humanity for what they did to Riko Amanai, blind him completely. He wanted to wipe out all non-sorcerers on the planet purely because of what had happened so long ago. All the times that he had seen non-sorcerers treat sorcerers badly, whether it was Mimiko and Naniko, whether it was members of his own family, whether it was Riko Amanai, just for the fact that they were sorcerers. Geto had an immense desire to protect the weak, but the person that he saw currently as the weak were the sorcerers, because the sorcerers were willingly allowing themselves to be overthrown by humanity. Even though humanity was weaker than them, they were allowing it, which resulted in weaker sorcerers who didn't have the means to fight back yet to suffer, because the stronger sorcerers were not allowing it, but he was realizing just wiping all of them out was not the key to protecting them either. Now Geto still hated all of non-sorcerers. Nothing about that was ever going to change. In fact, he hated them even more for this, mainly because of the fact that he realized wiping them out would not be the thing that could solve his issues. He hated this. He wanted to find an easy path, but there was no easy path. He just knew he needed to find a way in order to protect the weak. However, then a solution came to his mind, a pretty easy one as well, which was instead of wiping out all of the non-sorcerers, what if he just made sorcerers the one in charge of the planet, and then slowly with time eventually root out all of the non-sorcerers. Rather than doing one massive wipe out of all non-sorcerers, instead he just slowly with time made the world sorcerers instead of non-sorcerers. That would be the best option that they could have, allowing them to keep the world as it is right now and improve it more and more for cursed energy, while slowly getting rid of the problem that was cursed spirits. However, even trying that was going to be difficult and way too time consuming. There was no way he was going to pull that in just his normal lifespan, so he'd need to find some way to extend his life, which he knew was possible. After all, Ryoma and Sukuna had found the way to do so. He figured out some way to split his soul into several fingers, so if Sukuna could do it, then so could he. Of course, Tengen was also immortal, but he considered that basically impossible to mimic, mainly because that was Tengen's own curse technique that allowed them to do so. As he told the other members of his family that they were going to call off the night parade of 100 demons. Now, at first they were a little bit sad about this and they did want to go through with it, until Geto properly explained to them that even if they won here, even if everything went right for them, it would not lead to the world that they want, and it would be too much work and too much risk to try and repair it, which made them slowly understand, especially because most of them were just following Geto's will anyway. However, it was then someone else entered into the fray. Another sorcerer. A woman with short black hair as well as black eyes, but most notably of all, they had a large scar across their forehead, one that looked like stitches. Now, first the members of the family were on guard, including Geto. However, the woman very quickly explained that she wasn't actually here against them, but because she wanted to join them. She was a sorcerer just like them, and she despised all the non-sorcerers that existed. So after doing some searching, she found this place and she knew she wanted to join with them. She knew that this would be the way to accomplish her goals. She already did have a plan set in motion, but it was something that she was going to need the help of strong sorcerers like Geto from. And Geto was more than willing to accept the help. After all, they were another sorcerer. He saw no reason why not to trust them, and he did ask for the woman's name, as the woman told them that her name was Kaori Itadori. As Gojo and tens of other sorcerers were now waiting for Geto to begin his attack, while Megumi and Maki were staying behind at Jujutsu High. However, nothing came. They waited for hours and yet nothing came, no cursed spirits, and at first Gojo thought that this was just all a trap, and that Geto had mainly gone to Jujutsu High. However, there were no reports there either, and this was really weird. That was until a single flyhead came over, and the flyhead was carrying a phone in order to play a message for Gojo, which the message was that he was going to call off the night parade of 100 demons. He can thank Megumi for convincing him that this wasn't the right path. However, while he did agree that this wasn't the right path anymore, this didn't mean that he was going to join forces with Jujutsu High either, just that he wasn't planning to go on his quest to wipe out every non-sorcerer on the planet. And from that, Gojo was feeling a wide range of emotions right now. In one way, he was really happy, because this would mean he would not need to kill his best friend. However, he was also rather cautiously optimistic. After all, Geto wasn't really planning to join sides with them, and there was no telling what he was actually planning to do either. Furthermore, he still also had his several thousands of curses as well, and for all he knew, Geto could just be doing this as a bluff and a feint in order to prepare for a proper war and maybe upgrading their curse amount from a couple thousand to several millions, since he did know there were many curses on the planet. So as a result of that, Gojo, as well as several of the students and sorcerers, now felt a much greater desire to get stronger in preparation for Geto. After all, beforehand, it was just getting stronger for curses and having to fight future curses, but now it was preparation for whatever Geto might have planned, especially because a bunch of the curses didn't actually trust in Gojo to take out Geto if he became a threat. The reason for that was because Gojo knew about the fact that Geto wiped out a village of people, and yet he still didn't go for him in the 10 years that had passed. So they knew that Gojo wouldn't be reliable to take on this threat. Any cursed spirit they knew Gojo would definitely be reliable on, but not Geto. So they knew they were going to need to get stronger. After all, most sorcerers had non-sorcerers that they knew they wanted to protect. And this leads into quite a lot of good things actually happening for the timeline. Now there are a lot more sorcerers that are actually left alive, mainly because the Night Parade never happened, which did butcher quite a few of them. A good chunk of them also felt a massive desire to get stronger and train as well, in preparation for the special grade threat that was Suguru Geto. This also results in Kyoto High as well as Tokyo High having a bunch more students than what they would have in canon, because a few of them did not die from the Night Parade. Nanami would more than likely get his Black Flash record from another mission, and this also leads into him not retiring from being a Jujutsu sorcerer either, mainly because the Night Parade never happens, and he never has to watch the students die from the Night Parade. And now all the students are also going to start out at a bit of a stronger position than what they were in canon. Even Maki is going to get stronger, mainly because Mai is going to be afraid of what Geto might end up doing and want to get stronger as a result. Now Mai is not going to feel an immense desire to train, but it's going to be enough to allow Maki to at least be somewhat stronger than her canon counterpart. However, the most important person here to focus on is going to be Megumi, the title character of the What If, that I realize I haven't talked about that much yet. Megumi himself did not take this as a victory for one very important reason, and that was the fact that Geto hadn't actually attacked. Geto hadn't admitted he was wrong, just that he wasn't going to go down this path. Geto was still a threat, and he still had a hate for non-sorcerers. Megumi only pointed out the flaws in his plan. He never really changed his opinion on it, just that his plan was stupid. That was all he had done. Geto was still a threat, and Megumi knew that he was going to be the one to put him down at the end of the day. If Geto ended up trying to do anything wrong, he was going to kill him. But he still had something else he needed to do as well, which was helping free Tsumiki from the curse that he had placed on her. Now Gojo was actually hoping that Geto might end up arriving and battling against Megumi, which might end up helping freeing the curse. However, that did not end up happening, so they were going to have to do this the long way in order to figure out how to do so. However, he did explain something else to Megumi that he found rather interesting, which was the fact that Megumi was actually the one to curse Tsumiki and not the other way around, and that love was the reason why that Tsumiki was still around, because he had loved Tsumiki so much that he couldn't accept her dying. But most importantly of all, that Gojo and Megumi were related, that Megumi was a very distant cousin of him and a member of the Gojo clan. This was because of Megumi's mom having very distant relations to the Gojo clan as well. However, he did tell Megumi to keep this as a secret between the two of them. After all, if the Zenin clan or Gojo clan found out about this, both of them would be fighting even more for Megumi than they already were, and they knew that Megumi would not want to deal with that. As Megumi had now gained a new goal, a new focus and determination in order to do a total of 3 things. Number 1, free Tsumiki from the curse. The second thing was to tame Mahoraga, and the third and most important thing of all was to prepare to protect so many normal people from the likes of Geto and other threats that might come in the future. So this forced Megumi to begin to be even more experimental with his curse technique. After all, he knew he wasn't prepared to take on Mahoraga, not yet, so he wanted to figure out new ways to use his curse technique and become a better sorcerer with what he already had access to. This led into Megumi making the discovery that he was able to hold people as well as things in his own shadow, as well as be able to go into other people's shadows, and this is going to be very useful for fighting against other sorcerers especially, mainly because most people wouldn't be prepared to be dragged into their own shadow and be suffocated in there. He also had a very large focus on trying to free Tsumiki from the curse. Of course, he was trying to get stronger over this time, but his main focus was freeing Tsumiki from the curse. However, even as a year passed, he ultimately ended up failing. However, something else did happen as well, as Megumi had decided to ask Gojo if he could be bumped down to a first year at the time he was actually supposed to enter Jujutsu High. While he was thankful for being allowed in early, he did want to actually go through school like a normal kid and go through it with people his own age, not people older than him by a year. There was still that desire Megumi had to have somewhat of a normal life. And during this year of training, he did come up with a theory that he was trying to figure out how he would do, but he wasn't too sure yet. He wanted to see if he could pour Tsumiki's curse energy into his 10 shadows. After all, pouring them into the Shikigami would be a much easier method to get rid of Tsumiki's curse. After all, he would be able to regulate the curse energy a lot easier in the 10 Shadows than he would be in his sword, which was breakable. But between missions, training, figuring out how to use 10 Shadows better, research, as well as learning how to use Tsumiki in combat properly, he couldn't fully fulfill this fury yet. And 1 year eventually passes, one rather uneventful year in between killing curses and all the sorcerers getting stronger, until Maki Zenin is sent out on a mission to retrieve one of Sukuna's fingers that they had reported to be found. Now, in case you're wondering why Maki is being sent out instead of Megumi, Megumi is a bit too powerful to be sent out for missions like this. However, Maki is certainly fitting the bill to be strong enough for a mission like this, considering the curse that they're reporting isn't too strong. That and the higher-ups really did not want to risk the potential of Tsumiki interacting with a Sukuna cursed finger, considering what those were able to do for normal cursed spirits, let alone someone like Tsumiki who was a powerful vengeful cursed spirit. This later on leads into them both battling against the cursed spirit they battled against before, as well as Yuji consuming the cursed finger of Sukuna and reawakening Sukuna in the modern era. This also leads into Gojo battling against Sukuna in Yuji's body. After all, he did still want to test them nonetheless, and show off in front of Maki instead of showing off in front of Megumi. Yuji was also able to tell pretty fast that Maki did not like her teacher. As Megumi heard about this news, and he was contemplating how he felt about this. Now, of course, he was more than aware of the threat that was Sukuna. Sukuna was someone who could kill a mass amount of people, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a bit of a kinship with Yuji as well, even though we hadn't met him. Several people had thought of Megumi as a threat purely because of the existence of Tsumiki. Sure, with time, Megumi had been able to learn how to control Tsumiki and not release them on bad targets, but that wasn't always the case. Now, Tsumiki did always have a bit more of a dormant personality, so she was never really going to be a threat to most people, but at the same time, Megumi couldn't always summon her and call upon her. But now Tsumiki was more than willing to work alongside him and more than willing to help him as well, so part of him had to wonder, could the same happen with Sukuna? Of course, there was no way it was going to be willing, but he had to believe there was some potential way that that curse could be turned for good, just like Tsumiki's was. But ultimately, he decided that he would decide his opinion when he finally met Yuji in person. Was he going to be on the side that he should die right here and now, or was he going to believe that he should be spared? Now, Megumi was not the only first year. There still were 3 other first years left available, but they were currently all out on a mission, so Gojo was going to have to wait for them to meet Yuji as well. But Gojo was more than willing to introduce Megumi to Yuji, and it didn't take long until the two of them met. And once the two of them met, he couldn't help but notice the fact that Yuji was a lot like somebody else he used to know in his past. Yuji was a lot like Tsumiki. He was a good person, someone who he definitely would have been okay with Tsumiki dating, as he wished that Tsumiki was not a cursed spirit and actually a sorcerer, so he could try and set that up, but at the same time that wasn't going to happen ever. But he also was just happy to see who Yuji was as a person, that he was a good person intent on killing Sukuna and helping as many people as he could, especially when he heard that his goal was to give people good deaths. And because of that, he actually explained to Yuji what his own goal was. There were several more vengeful cursed spirits that existed around the world. Not all of them were like Tsumiki who were willing to help people. However, he wanted to help free as many of them as he could. That was his goal, to make sure vengeful cursed spirits wouldn't exist anymore, and he wanted to ask Yuji to help him with this goal. This would allow human spirits that were turned into cursed spirits to finally be able to move on in peace, and upon hearing that goal, Yuji was more than willing to immediately agree in order to help them out, as the two of them now had very similar goals to each other. Yuji wanted to help Megumi out with his own goal, while trying to get as many fingers of Sukuna as possible, to eventually die and take the King of Curses down with him. Now, Megumi did not like the fact that Yuji's eventual goal was to die, and a part of him did wonder if he could eventually find one of the Sukuna fingers without him knowing and hiding it, but that was going to be for later. However, there was one other thing that Yuji desired upon seeing how strong Megumi was, which was strength. Strength to be just like Megumi. After all, Megumi himself was insanely strong, already a special grade upon his first year of entering, and he was the same age as him as well. Meanwhile, there was Yuji, who was still much more newer to curse energy, and he asked Megumi another question. He asked Megumi if he could help teach him how to utilize curse energy properly. Megumi nodded, as he was more than prepared to help him with that, and he told him that the two of them were going to start today. Unfortunately, that was when Gojo interrupted, telling the two of them that they weren't going to have time as they had to pick up a new student. Yuji wasn't going to be the only student that was going to join them today, as they had one more person to add to their first-year generation, making this one of the biggest first-year generation ever. Yuji looked a bit impressed by that until he looked over at Megumi, who Megumi told him that there are only going to be 6 of them, including this new person. Which that really put into perspective for Yuji just how little Jujutsu sorcerers actually do end up surviving. As Yuji, Gojo, and Megumi were all on their way to meet Nobara, while at the same time Kenjaku was preparing with his new ally Geto for what was to come in the future. But now Yuji, Megumi, and Gojo are going off in order to meet the next first year that's going to join them, a first year named Nobara Kugisaki. And this leads into this meeting going pretty much the exact same, as well as Yuji and Nobara's first mission. Since considering Gojo already didn't have normal Megumi participate, he's not going to have this much stronger Megumi participate, since that would basically end the test. However, things truly begin to change when Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi all head to the detention center. And by that I mean things change for the better. This is because of one reason and one reason alone. Megumi at this current point in time is a special grade in terms of level. He is already stronger than his canon counterpart at its peak. So sorry to have to speed through this, but I don't think I have to tell anybody that Megumi is going to absolutely destroy the Finger Bearer, which as a result of this actually has some pretty wild side effects, with one of the big main side effects it ends up having being that Yuji does not make a binding vow with Sukuna. And while Yuji and Nobara could tell just based off what they sensed about Megumi that he was strong as hell, now they could really see it on display. Megumi was not someone to be trifled with. So now Yuji has a total of 3 fingers of Sukuna consumed within his body. And with their return, Megumi begins to teach him properly how to use Cursed Energy. Up first explaining to him the basics of fundamentals of Cursed Energy, the differences between Cursed Energy usage as well as Cursed Technique usage. Gojo is also here and he chimes in as well in order to offer his own support. This leads into Yuji doing the same movie type training that he did originally. And to both Megumi and Gojo's shock, Yuji was a natural in learning how to control his Cursed Energy, considering he was able to figure out how to do this efficiently while feeling a wild flux of emotions in just a couple of hours. However, when Yuji displays Divergent Fist, it ends up catching both Megumi and Gojo off guard. After all, they'd never seen someone have delayed Cursed Energy before, and they knew exactly what the result of this was, from Yuji being so physically strong that his Cursed Energy wasn't able to keep up with him naturally. Now Megumi was also thinking on if there was a potential way in order for him to strengthen that ability even further. After all, for some reason he wasn't able to sense a Divergent Fist. What other possibilities and traits could the Divergent Fist have? Maybe even adding some binding vows to it in order to increase its power could be even more impressive. All these are things to experiment with later, especially considering he didn't want to overwhelm Yuji yet, and he was still just getting introduced to the world of Cursed Energy to begin with. No need to put him in depth with crazy concepts like binding vows yet. This was something that Megumi explained to him right off the bat, that this was likely not him using Cursed Energy properly because he wasn't able to time it properly and had a delay. But it would still be a good trait to keep in mind and use for Yuji. He would just need to adapt it with normal Cursed Energy control and practice. We now return back to Geto's headquarters, where currently Geto was sitting inside, enjoying some tea with his new ally, Kaori Itadori. As they were talking about the new recent news that they had heard, which was that somebody had become the vessel of Ryom in Sukuna. As Geto then said, "From what I heard, their name is Yuji Itadori. I didn't know you had someone related to you, Kaori." As Kaori then explained that that person was their son, however they weren't aware that they could awaken Cursed Energy. And it made a lot of sense to Geto why that they weren't aware of them. After all, Geto was the same person who had killed his own parents due to them not being sorcerers. If Kaori had a similar ideology to him, then it would make a lot of sense why she wouldn't care much about her son if they didn't show off any signs of them being able to awaken Cursed Energy. However, that still didn't make Geto slightly suspicious about this. He decided he was going to figure out more about this later, but for now, he was just going to continue to listen along. Besides, it wasn't really like he felt he had a reason to doubt Kaori yet. As Geto then asked, "Now that you're aware they have the ability and usage of Cursed Energy, what's your plan now?" Kaori responded they were planning to at least meet up with their son sooner or later. They were going to try and get them on their side. Or at worst, just try and make sure they weren't going to be involved with that much of the plan. Though she did mention that another issue was that now Sukuna was present inside of Yuji, and how the Higher-Ups were planning to execute her son as soon as they got all the fingers. She did also admit that getting Sukuna on their side would more than likely definitely be impossible, considering everything that they had heard about Sukuna. However, this also brought up another interesting possibility. From what they had seen, Sukuna's fingers were able to amplify cursed spirits. So if they were to collect some of Sukuna's fingers and then feed them to cursed spirits or get out of capture, he might be able to get a stronger arsenal. That'll require them making sure the Sukuna fingers would be removed. But now, most certainly, the sparks of ideas and experimentation in science were being sparked into both Geto and especially Kaori's head, on how they could potentially experiment around with Sukuna's fingers in order to make cursed spirits stronger in abundance. Though at the same time, Kaori wasn't too sure if it was possible for them to maintain that strength while removing that finger. Maybe it could be possible and then we just force the evolution of cursed spirits. Either way, it was something they definitely want to experiment with now. However, Geto then said, "I know the real reason why you want to get those fingers. That's to make sure your son doesn't have to die, correct? Well, since he's a sorcerer like us, I'm more than willing to help." With Kaori thanking Geto for their kindness and mercy, for trying to go out of the way to help Kaori's son not die immediately. Recently, over the past year, Geto's faction had expanded magnificently, with them taking in even more people who didn't want to follow the higher-ups' commands. Furthermore, in 1 year alone, especially with Kaori's assistance, they had been able to increase the amount of cursed spirits that Geto had captured. Where originally Geto only had a total of 6,000 captured, now he had increased that number all the way to 12,000. But they weren't fully preparing for a war either. They just needed that extra firepower in case Jujutsu High ever decided to try and fight back and fire back against them. No, their plan was rather simple. That plan was to put people in Jujutsu society in higher roles of power. But first they would need the power at their disposal in order to actually succeed in those goals. Once they had that power, they could slowly take out non-sorcerers and replace them with their own kind. Which meant their plan ultimately had two steps to it. The first part was to put Jujutsu society in a higher state of power, and the second part was to slowly breed out the culture of non-sorcerers, and to slowly acclimate their own culture into the world. Or at least that was the plan that Geto had with Kaori's suggestions. As after they were done taking stock of everything that they had access to and their resources, Kaori eventually left, with Kaori heading to another location, a location that seemed to be pretty far away from humanity in general. And at this location were 4 curses that she had made deals with. These 4 being Jogo, Hanami, Mahito, and Dagon. She was doing her best to keep these as secrets from Geto for now, primarily because she didn't want Geto to absorb them yet. She wanted them to be more evolved before that happened. But these 4 were all going to be rather helpful and useful for their plan to seal away Satoru Gojo. Now his plans with the disaster curses, or at least their spoken plans, do remain the same for now, which still leads into Jogo being overconfident and trying to challenge Gojo. And when they battle, it still has the same result, with Yuji being brought over to see Jogo's domain expansion, with a new goal being set in Yuji's mind of power, but not just wanting to catch up to Megumi, but also wanting to catch up to Jogo, even though he did think that Megumi was much stronger than Jogo. So he felt more like Jogo was going to be a good stepping stone in the way to his goal. Which this does lead into another unfortunate side effect, since Yuji is not going to be working with Nanami in this timeline, because he doesn't really need to fake his death. That means that Nanami nor Yuji are going to be appointed on that mission. So Junpei is still going to end up being toyed around with by Mahito. However, in place of that, something else interesting does happen, because 2 people do arrive at Tokyo High in order to go check things out and meet the first years, especially because in the past they had already met one of them in the past in the previous festival, who Todo in particular very much did not like. That was because he did not like Megumi's taste in women. But when Todo tried to fight Megumi about it, he got beaten up really badly. However, when he arrived, he ended up meeting up with 3 people, one of them being Megumi Fushiguro, who he really didn't want to see. The other being Nobara Kugasaki, who was basically a nobody in his eyes, but the final person he was interested in was the person who was known as the Vessel of Sukuna, that being Yuji Itadori. Now this leads into Todo and Yuji becoming friends much earlier than they would in canon. Around a month earlier, in fact. But furthermore, this also leads into Yuji having a proper idea on how to control his cursed energy fully in his head. And he's doing all of that a month earlier than he would normally in canon. Now I will say that Yuji is going to end up being a bit more injured from this, primarily because he's not going to have fought Mahito in the past, but I don't think he's substantially weaker in comparison to his Mahito part, to the point where he wouldn't be able to fight Todo after properly learning how to control his cursed energy. And worst case scenario, after that sparring match is done, Megumi is just going to heal Yuji using Madoka Deer. Which lets Yuji meet the deer, and he pets the deer because he likes the deer. The healing deer is a good deer. Now Yuji is going to know how to do the Black Flash, but he is not going to perform it on Todo, because I don't think Todo would actually make Yuji perform the Black Flash on him, but rather tell him to keep him in mind and try and perform it when he's fighting against other opponents and other foes. This also leads into Nobara getting a substantial power amp too, primarily because she is going to be fighting and sparring against both Megumi and Yuji pretty often. Though Megumi is not going to be as often, because Megumi is pretty often swarmed with missions. Due to being one of the 4 special grades on the planet, he is pretty often sent out on missions. And with each of these sparring matches, they did have a very common result of Megumi having to fight both Yuji and Nobara at the same time. And even though Megumi was technically physically weaker than Yuji was, thanks to how much cursed energy that Megumi got from Tsumiki, he really didn't even need to use his 10 shadows against either of them, and cursed energy reinforcement was more than enough to handle them both. Megumi was a master of cursed energy. He had spent most of his life getting better and better of how to use it, while also trying to figure out more and more how to permanently remove vengeful cursed spirits from the world as a whole. So no wonder his reinforcement was completely top-notch. A prodigy second to Satoru Gojo. However, each time they sparred, Megumi was noticing more and more that he had to hold back less and less how much reinforcement he was using. He could use more and more of his reinforcement and physical abilities against Yuji and Nobara, especially Yuji with his growing strength. If Megumi was being honest, he felt it was going to be more and more likely that he might end up needing to just use his full reinforcement eventually on Yuji in the future. Todo really helped to progress Yuji quite a lot. Now he wasn't there yet, but he was definitely on the path to being there. However, a small part of Megumi was happy about this. For a long while, the only real person he could consider stronger than him was Satoru Gojo. He honestly didn't really have any rivals. The closest he had was the 3rd year Akari Kinji, and if he was being honest, he really didn't like Akari's personality. However, both Yuji and Nobara could grow to catch up to him, especially Yuji. He felt he would no longer be alone in that level of strength. Now, of course, Megumi didn't feel complete isolation in his strength, primarily because there was still one person who he felt was always going to be above him, that being Satoru Gojo. Though maybe in the future Megumi might be able to catch up to him, he wasn't too sure yet. Either way, he was also continuing to get stronger as well. Megumi's growing strength has had another side effect, with Gojo's existence and him getting stronger, as well as Megumi getting stronger and Yuki Tsukumo and Geto also getting stronger with time. This has led to stronger cursed spirits needing to spawn. As today, Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi were all sent out on different missions. Megumi was being sent out in order to handle what was reported to be a special grade curse. One had the power of cockroaches, but there was something that was even more terrifying about it. In the area where that cursed spirit was spawned, there have been rumors of a Sukuna finger roaming around there. Now they weren't certain about those rumors yet, but they had heard quite a bit of them. And Megumi had a new mission. He needed to make sure that this cursed spirit did not get to the finger, so he'd need to find that first before anything else. After all, fingers are able to turn weaker cursed spirits into special grade level curses. Imagine what it could do for a curse that's already special grade. Meanwhile, Yuji and Nobara were being sent out in order to handle a vengeful cursed spirit. One that was previously reported to be a martial artist, though before Yuji was allowed to leave, he did have a small talk with Megumi, because he did remember what Megumi's goal was, which was to try and stop the eventual spawning of vengeful cursed spirits as a whole. With Megumi telling him that vengeful cursed spirits are actually more likely to be able to be talked to. After all, they were previously human in the past. And Yuji was going to keep that in mind. He felt that maybe if he was able to converse with a vengeful cursed spirit, that they might be able to come to some agreement, and he might be able to free them from their curse. He also told Megumi that he would tell him any of his findings that he found in this battle. Nobara also decided that she would join into the conversation and do the same. After all, it wasn't like this was just Yuji's mission to go on, this was her mission to go on as well. And if she could help one of her friend's goals in order to stop those vengeful cursed spirits from spawning, she'd definitely be down. A smile did appear on Gojo's face as well. He was happy to see that all of his kids were developing and developing well. Though Gojo also had his own mission to go on. He just wanted to see his students go off before they left. Megumi would have been driven over to a village, or at least what looked like the remains of one. A veil was being cast over in order to make sure other people wouldn't be able to see what had happened. And while they were able to evacuate some people, this cursed spirit had already arrived and killed over 130 people. Upon hearing that report, a focus entered into Megumi's eyes, as he opened up one of his hands and allowed his jet black blade to rise out from his shadow. A focus and determination entered into Megumi's eyes, as he was determined to avenge every single life here and to put down this cursed spirit himself. Though before he went in, he decided to ask the manager if they had already managed to find Sukuna's finger and consume it or not. And they told him that they were not able to find the finger. They weren't too sure if the curse had managed to eat the finger or not. Megumi decided that he was going to operate under the assumption that they did already eat the finger, which meant that putting this thing down was going to be all the more priority, as he closed his eyes and told Tsumiki that he was going to need her help for this. This is a special grade that was more on the powerful end, so it was one he could not risk underestimating. As out from Megumi's shadow, the manager was able to see two eyes rise out that looked upon them for a second. And despite the raw power that was emanating from those eyes, they honestly felt rather gentle. And while Megumi wasn't certain how much of his arsenal he was going to need to take out this cursed spirit, he was fully ready to use everything he could. Now he was pretty sure he had a way to win if he really wanted to, which is Madoka Deer due to them releasing positive curse energy. But there's also a small part of Megumi that did want to test himself and see what he was capable of achieving against his cockroach cursed spirit. So he wasn't planning to use that yet at least. And with that, Megumi enters into the barrier in preparation to fight off against the cockroach curse. Kurorushi was currently standing on one of the rooftops with another cursed spirit standing next to him, that cursed spirit being Mahito. As Mahito then said, seems the plan to lure out Megumi worked. Eliminate him and do the best you can. And if you absolutely need to, be sure to eat this. Anyways, I wish you the best of luck, Kurorushi. Before Mahito left after passing Kurorushi one of Sukuna's fingers. He was going to use this as an observing opportunity. He was fully expecting Kurorushi to die, but he also wanted to see what would happen. He wanted to see how strong Megumi was, so he would know how strong he would have to get. Before Kurorushi then made a giant tornado of cockroaches, using this as a signal to tell Megumi to bring it on. Megumi would have then entered into the abandoned village, being completely on guard. He didn't know what to expect, but he did know there was a Sukuna finger somewhere here, so he was going to need to be extra careful. Out from his shadow, a blade began to rise, a blade he had crafted during the past year. His own custom curse tool. He was looking around preparation, seeing several weaker end curses around here, but none of them were choosing to fight them. They could each feel they could feel Tsumiki's presence, and it was rather terrifying to all of them. Megumi knew none of these weaker end curses were responsible for it. He needed to find the main curse responsible. Before suddenly he saw a massive wave of cockroaches fly right towards his direction. The attack itself wasn't an issue for him, but it was more the fact that it was being launched to him at all, which made him realize that the cursed spirit was likely also hunting after him, as he was in front of himself to spot the curse. A much larger cockroach around the same size as a human wearing a black cloak, standing on what looked like a tornado of cockroaches. Not just that, but Megumi could sense something else. He was able to sense that it hadn't consumed Sukuna's finger yet, but it had Sukuna's finger on them. Megumi now had two objectives. The first objective was to kill this cursed spirit before they had the chance to consume the finger, and the second was to make sure that it couldn't consume the finger by getting it first. This led to Megumi thinking on which of his Shikigami would be best to use against something like this. He ultimately came to the decision that two Shikigami would be best for this type of battle. His opponent was a cursed spirit that was capable of creating large amounts of enemies, which meant that area control would be absolutely necessary. So Megumi made the hand sign for Nue, causing Nue to rise up and Megumi to jump onto Nue's back as Nue began to fly around. Kurorushi, seeing their opponent, began to release swarm after swarm of cockroaches, releasing two massive swarms and having them both fly at Megumi's direction. Megumi then placed his hand on a shadow and went into it. As Nue activated their lightning, purple lightning surrounding their entire body while they flew right into the wave of cockroaches, but as they were flying through it, they were shredding and frying each of the cockroaches. The purple electricity was far too hot for just normal cockroaches to handle, even if amplified by cursed energy, so was Nue amplified by Megumi's near boundless amount of CE. And it almost made Nue look like they were completely purple. Kurorushi was caught heavily off guard by this, so they instead chose to jump backwards, having the other wave cockroach fly back to its body in order for them to have a platform to stand on, as Kurorushi took out their blade, preparing to make contact with Nue. However, right before contact could be made, Megumi rose out from the shadow, jumping over both Nue and Kurorushi and slashing his blade down on Kurorushi's back, landing a combo for Nue to slam right into them and release a large wave of electricity both into Kurorushi and their cockroaches. This resulting attack knocked Kurorushi through a couple of walls, resulting in some buildings collapsing. Primarily just housing, though Kurorushi was still alive, and they were now starting to heal from their wounds as well. Kurorushi couldn't believe it. Judging by how things were going right now, this kid was certainly going to kill him. Though Kurorushi did have one more option that they were hoping they weren't going to need to rely on this fast, but at the same time, this kid was certainly the real deal in front of them, resulting in Kurorushi very quickly consuming the cursed finger of Ryomen Sukuna, and its body began to mutate. Megumi's eyes widened in worry as he realized exactly what had just happened. He hoped that initial barrage was going to be enough to take it out, but it clearly wasn't, so he took out his blade in preparation as he looked towards the rubble of where Kurorushi was. And out from that rubble, he would see something that looked rather humanoid walk towards them, a completely new form in comparison to what they had previously. Though despite being humanoid, it clearly wasn't human. With pure white skin and 4 eyes, it was staring at Megumi. Though it did have a few notable things left from Kurorushi, one of those things of course being its cloak. However, the most notable thing about them was the fact that those cockroaches not just remained, but seemed to be getting stronger, almost like their entire body was being coated in cursed energy in that blue flame, as they all began to fly right towards Kurorushi's body, preparing for a command. While Kurorushi had taken on the form of a finger bearer, he still had access to his cursed technique. More than that, it was now magnified to be even stronger. Megumi though wasn't too concerned. From what he could tell, his same tactic from before should still work on this thing. He was just going to need to be more cautious as well as use more power than he was previously. It then suddenly sped up, rushing right towards Megumi with cursed energy surrounding its fist, as it punched Megumi straight in the face, sending Megumi rocketing backwards before it then lifted up its hand, sending a massive wave of cockroaches all towards Megumi's direction. But once they reached Megumi, they saw that nobody was there. Megumi had already managed to sink into one of the shadows, which that angered Kurorushi as he began to look around frantically, trying to find where he was located. Until out from one of the shadows, a tongue wrapped around its arm and began to pull him down, with Kurorushi immediately sending the cockroaches right towards that direction, but that was a Wells unknown abyss. As from the other direction, another tongue rose out, and another, and another. He was being surrounded by tongues, each trying to hold them down, and while Kurorushi was separating the cockroaches and where they were going, it was thinning out his resources. Until out from one of the shadows directly next to Kurorushi, Megumi rose out and landed a punch straight on their jaw, pushing Kurorushi backwards but not by much, as Kurorushi surrounded both of their fists in cursed energy and began to rush towards Megumi. At the same time, he called back his cockroaches, having them all go for the summoner at once. Megumi quickly jumped backwards away from Kurorushi before underneath himself he summoned Maximum Elephant, having Maximum Elephant fire an AoE attack of water right at all of the cockroaches at once. This water was so blown it was even managing to push Kurorushi back a little bit, but not by much. As Megumi hopped onto Max Elephant's back before pointing his sword forward, out from his sword, 3 unknown well abyss tongues ended up grabbing onto Kurorushi and pulling him towards them, not letting him get away that easy. Megumi's blade was a cursed tool that he had made through experience. Not just did it have Tsumiki's cursed energy infused into it, but it also had his own shadows inside of it. That way it could connect directly to his cursed technique. And Kurorushi was trying to refuse. He was trying to break through the tongues, and he was doing so successfully, but it was just replaced by more. However, as he broke from one of them, suddenly he saw something rush towards him. He couldn't really make the shape out of it fully because of how fast it was moving, but it appeared to be both wolf and man-like, before suddenly a part of its face was clawed out by Divine Dog Totality as it was behind him now. This Divine Dog Totality dwarfed Megumi in size, being near triple the size of his body. but in spite of its massive size, it was not held back in speed. All the cockroaches decided to rush at Divine Dog Totality, seeing them as the greatest threat. In spite of having the advantage in number and size, they still weren't able to get anywhere close to Divine Dog Totality and its speed, as Divine Dog was dodging by jumping from building to building, avoiding each of the cockroach swarms with relative ease. Meanwhile, Kurorushi was stuck fighting directly against Megumi, as Kurorushi focused cursed energy around its hands. Kurorushi's instincts were telling him to perform a move, as he began to take the shape and mold of an arrow before firing that right at Megumi's direction. Megumi then slid underneath the arrow. He was able to sense that would have definitely done some damage, so he would have had to use RCT to heal, before he began to rush right towards Kurorushi, dodging another one of the arrows before punching it hard in the face. Kurorushi then focused cursed energy towards his fist, as it clashed fists with Megumi, sending a shockwave right through the ground. And as they were moving their fist packs, while Kurorushi was preparing to try and land another punch, Megumi instead made the hand sign to summon Orochi, having Orochi slam right into Kurorushi and slam them through several walls. Kurorushi was about to call back the cockroaches towards himself until Orochi faded, as Megumi rose out from one of the shadows again and uppercutted in the jaw, distracting Kurorushi for a moment and delaying their callback of the cockroaches. And then Megumi took advantage of this chance and jumped over Kurorushi, summoning Max Elephant directly on top of them to make them land on its body and crush Kurorushi. Megumi then called off Maximum Elephant, as Kurorushi was laying on the ground twitching. They seemed to be heavily damaged. Megumi took out his blade. He was preparing to finish off Kurorushi until suddenly he heard the sounds of cockroaches all around him. They were now taking advantage of this chance to try and do one final rush at him. However, Megumi expected that, as he made a hand sign for Nue one more time, having Nue rise out at a much larger size, pumping a lot more curse energy into Nue this time. Now Nue had reached the same size Maximum Elephant. And at the same time, Divine Dog Totality rushed down towards Kurorushi, as Nue flapped its wings, releasing a large wave of purple lightning and executing all of the cockroaches in one move, while Divine Dog Totality jumped down and impaled Kurorushi right through the chest, killing it and taking out the finger. Megumi then unsummoned both of his Shikigami, as he smiled a bit. He had to admit, this was slightly fun. Now, he did have a way that he could have taken out Kurorushi earlier, but he wanted to test himself out, which was the reason why he didn't use Madoka Deer in this battle. In truth, Megumi did have this completely under his control, though he did also acknowledge the threat that was Kurorushi if he managed to get out and past him. Other than Gojo and maybe the other special grade Yuki Tsukumo, he didn't think there was anyone who was actually capable of handling that. This was also quite a good experiment for Mahito himself to witness, though it did confirm one thing to Mahito: all of the disaster curses were going to need to get stronger to take that thing on. It would be one thing if Megumi was able to take out Kurorushi. It was another thing entirely the fact that Megumi was able to take out Kurorushi after it consumed one of Sukuna's fingers. And most of all, Megumi was able to do that while holding back and not calling upon the power of the Queen of Curses. Mahito was hoping he'd be able to see Tsumiki's power in action here, but he didn't, and that both disappointed him and worried him. Not just was he wielding an incredibly strong curse spirit, but he was wielding a strong curse technique and strong power that he could call upon. But in spite of it all, he still managed to learn quite a bit. He had managed to get quite a bit of information from this. This was definitely a successful trip. And without Megumi discovering Mahito, Mahito quickly snuck away, both Mahito and Megumi leaving the area, going back to their own respective bases. And as Megumi left, Megumi approached the manager who was waiting outside for him, and he told the manager, "Can you bring me to the higher-ups? I need to directly report the completion of this mission." Now, this did slightly catch them off guard. After all, from what they knew, they didn't need to directly report it in person. However, they did decide to agree to do so. This is also because Megumi had something that he wanted to directly say towards the higher-ups, something he wanted to talk to them about in person, and that couldn't wait. Meanwhile, Mahito returned back to the base, with Kaori and the other 3 disaster curses waiting. As Mahito then asked Kaori, is it possible to seal more than one person with the prison realm or no? With Kaori simply saying no, before that told them everything they needed to hear. Kaori realized in that moment that the result of Mahito's test was that none of them would be strong enough to take on Megumi as they were right now. Something that was backed up by Mahito's report, and everything that Mahito had told them about what happened in this battle, leading to Mahito explaining that all 4 of them were going to need to get stronger from here on out. Even if they managed to defeat Gojo and seal him away, they're still going to need to deal with the issue that is Megumi Fushiguro, something that Mahito wasn't too sure he could take on with all 4 of the disaster curses combined. And each of the curses understood this. They each agreed to this, that they were going to need to get stronger to be able to handle that threat. Though Jogo did have some confidence in Mahito being able to reach that level one day. He wasn't too sure about himself and the other 3, but Mahito was made as the leader for his potential and for that reason alone. Jogo was confident that Mahito was the way to get the world they wanted, even with Megumi and the way they would achieve that goal no matter what. We now return back to Megumi as Megumi entered the room with the higher-ups, as one of them said, "Good job on completing your mission. If this is your way to make up for disobeying one of our orders, then consider it more than done." With Megumi responding, "Right, disobeying one of your orders and eliminating another special grade curse as a result of that, and that is the actual reason I came here." A look of confusion entered onto the higher-ups, though their faces couldn't really be seen since they were being kept hidden, as one of them asked, Are you angry that there was a special grade curse there? We didn't know that there was. If we did, we would have made sure there was more reinforcement for Yuji and Nobara to handle it. Of course, we did get lucky because you ended up going with them and saving their lives. So I consider that luck being merciful to us. Is that all you wanted to talk about? A glare formed onto Megumi before curse energy began to erupt off of his body, a rather potent one as well, and a large amount of bloodlust could be felt in that curse energy. As he said, you know damn well that it wasn't luck that ended up sparing them, and you know damn well there was a special grade there. That was your attempt at assassinating Yuji Itadori for being the vessel of Sukuna, and you were gonna have Nobara be collateral. All four of the higher-ups felt a shake in their body upon feeling that massive amount of curse energy. They could tell by that bloodlust that Megumi was serious. Though one of the more daring higher-ups did have something to say. That's quite a big accusation. Are you able to prove it? As Megumi glared right towards that higher-up, sending a massive wave of bloodlust and curse energy towards them. Before out from underneath Megumi, Tsumiki began to rise up behind them, that bloodlust becoming even more potent. Tsumiki's body was twitching. She was preparing to kill them, but Megumi was holding her back for now. Whenever Megumi felt angry or was feeling bloodlust, Tsumiki always came out immediately to back him up. As Megumi then said, do understand that the only reason that you people are being kept alive today is because Gojo Satoru does not want to build his utopia on blood. So out of respect for his goal right now, I choose to keep you guys alive, despite the fact you try to kill Yuji Itadori and Nobara Kugasaki. But if you try and do that again, if you try and finish them off and kill them one more time and try and assassinate them, I will not be giving you guys that same mercy. I am not Gojo Satoru. I am fully fine with having to end all of you if I have to. So you can make your choice, either live smart or die stupid. I then pointed forward, having Tsumiki destroy all of the cover for the higher-ups, allowing Megumi to see each of the old people's faces directly. Megumi wanted to see the look in their eyes, and in their eyes he could see quite a cascade of emotions. Of course, fear was the most prominent one, but along that fear was also acceptance that they had to back off. Other than Gojo Satoru, in Jujutsu Society there was nobody capable of taking out Megumi, and they knew for a fact if Gojo Satoru had to choose between the higher-ups and Megumi, he was going to choose Megumi every single time. Any retaliation would more likely be met with their execution. Megumi could feel the enhancement of his bloodlust just from Tsumiki being present. Megumi was tempted, as he was really tempted for a moment to just finish them off. He was trying his best to ward off those thoughts. But he then had Tsumiki return back to his shadow as he realized the message was sent. If there was any slight form of hesitance, any slight form of denial in their eyes, Megumi more than likely would have killed them on the spot. But seeing that they all accepted it forcefully, Megumi had decided to leave. After Megumi left, the higher-ups made a call to Kyoto High, telling them to not go for killing Yuji Itadori in the Goodwill Festival event like they originally planned. The higher-ups were able to see in that moment that Megumi was a lot more willing to kill than Gojo was, and that was absolutely terrifying. They thought that Gojo Satoru was their greatest threat, but now they were realizing in reality their greatest threat was Megumi Fushiguro. While Megumi didn't have that same power that Gojo had, Megumi had a willingness to kill them, a much more willingness to kill them than even Gojo did. And against Megumi, they were on thin ice right now. They didn't want to try poking that bear. They did not want to try fighting against him. Maybe if Megumi got eliminated somehow, then they would have a chance, but they didn't really know how they could even do that or pull that off. Leading to Megumi returning back to Tokyo High and giving Gojo Satoru the finger of Ryoma and Sukuna that he had gained.